Good morning, everyone. It's been a while since I put anything up, and I said in my last video, like the one previous, and the one previous to that, and the one previous to that, that um, I had a New Year's resolution that I wanted to uh, produce more videos, but I'm the type of person that this is a hobby. It's just something that I want to kind of talk about with you as if you were here with me, and just share some kind of neutral wisdom about the game and about my thoughts, but maybe more general thoughts that people have thought about or haven't thought about. And I only like putting things up if I have something to say. Other people put up stuff that's the same stuff over and over and over again, and that just drives me crazy, and then I unsubscribe. I don't leave subscriptions on all the time. If I don't like, if I find that somebody's just going on and is actually trying to overreach, then I'm not keen to keep the subscription going. So I'm one of those jerks. But I don't want to waste your time. I want you to watch and say, hey, that made me think. So, uh, like the do a room a day dungeon, I was good for about 14 days, and then that was it. I was done with that. But I have been thinking about one of my resolutions, which was doing more things on the internet, and certainly doing more of this. But I haven't had anything really to talk about, and I'm completely and totally done with WotC. Um, and I just think that the discussion has played out, and it's what you think. So previously, I've said, I prefer live games, and I really think live games are the way that not just the old D&D was intended, but also new iterations of narrative role playing. So whether it's something from Free League, or whether it's Blades in the Dark, or whether it's Fate, whatever system you're using may uh, include narration. Certainly, Starforged and Iron Sworn is exemplary of that type of, you know, a group dynamic, and being in front of each other is much better. In my work, having people now get together once again, I've noticed that there's a dynamic which is absolutely fantastic, and there's also a keenness to participate in things that are live and in front of each other, much more so than, say, pre-COVID or the height of COVID. So that's my preference. And certainly I think that it's the best way to play, but not everybody has the best way to play. They either don't have friends in their areas, they live in rural communities, uh, they have social anxiety, which may cause them not to go to the friendly local game store or the university club. Um, there are lots of impediments to doing live gaming, and the expectations, I think that in terms of red cards and safety words and all this stuff that's plastic bubble around us, um, should really be more toward, are you an introvert or are you an extrovert? Because really that I think is much more important for a GM and for a group to understand, is there going to be an expectation to role play, or am I going to be just rolling and playing? Um, a board game has a very specific rule set and allows you to just enjoy a particular amount of time, unless you're playing Monopoly or diplomacy or something like that, which has limited or unlimited times. Uh, or you don't
But
want an unlimited amount of time. You want it condensed, and you want to know what you're doing. You know that you're coming to a game which is not going to make a fool of you. So if you enjoy set rules, that's great. If you enjoy rules that are more dynamic, where you have to be more creative, such as, say, drawing on a board or playing Pictionary or playing. And keep on looking at my library, expecting to have answers, but I think my uni daughter has taken away apples to apples, stuff that requires more imagination and more kind of bluffing and things, especially if you're trying to do role play. That it doesn't come naturally to everybody, and an introvert may be more reticent to involve themselves in those type of games like RPGs, not because Mercer is bad and Mercer is making the world expect a certain way of playing. I don't believe that garbage. I think that people have interpreted it that way, and I don't think that they're completely wrong. But I think that that's not the issue. The issue is really extroverts tend to be more willing to put themselves out there, whereas an introvert is much more guarded about embarrassment and about playing. I've kind of gotten over that with age. And so I'm much more, even though I'm an extreme introvert, I'm much more open to different things. But it still means that I'm not quite ready at all to go to the friendly local game store, which is about 25, 30 minutes away, and play live there, DM for them there, it, for a number of reasons, and we'll get into those in a second. Now, I do have 2 live games a week, which I play for about an hour and a half, an hour and 45 minutes. And those are very valuable to me. As you probably know, if you've watched before, that I do an after-school program right next door. And so on Tuesdays and Wednesdays, I go over to the school, and I GM Vason. And lately, the big news is that 2 weeks ago, they came to the game expecting that they were going to finish off everything and that they were going to wrap everything up with the 2 campaigns that they were on. And in actuality, they arrived, they sat down, and I said, "You see a blinding light." And over a few weeks leading up to that, I had said, "You see a lot of frost, and you see your breath on what looks like a mirror, and you can see these images. Some are red, some are purple, some are orange, and then you see faces." And they all thought that these were Vason. But in actuality, they were in a uh, what's called in Coriolis a coffin, and they were in a kind of like a stasis pod that had glass in the front of it. They were seeing the breath and also the stasis, which would have kept them kind of partially cooled down. And so they were playing a game. So Vason was a a kind of hollow game that they were playing in the game of Coriolis. And so so all of a sudden I handed out character sheets when I introduced the different characters. This is what you see when you look as the, as the glass is moving up. You start to see your face, and this is what you look like. Bang, and then there was an NPC, which really is it's an exemplar of teaching the rules, teaching who they are. So, oh, you don't remember who you are? You're my commander. Come on, get on with it. We've got to get moving. We've got a job to do. We need the burr. And so it was a wonderful moment. And one of the kids actually said, "Oh, they're not a kid. I think they're 14." But they said, uh, "You've outdone yourself," which, which I think is one of the highest compliments that a GM can ever get. They were really shocked. All 8 of them, the 2 groups, they were all there. And it was a really special moment. They had all been bugging me about playing a space game. And so I thought, look, this particular group only has 10 weeks before they graduate and go to high school. I I'm not comfortable going all the way to the high school and going through that rigmarole. I'm right next door to the middle school. It just makes sense. So I wanted to give them a bit of a boost. And the other group, um, they can choose. So they said to me a couple of weeks ago or last week, they said, "What, can we play Vassen again? Can we play our characters again?" I said, "Yeah, it's saved on disc." so so they were really excited. So that was my big news. So I play live, and so I get that boost. Now, if I've done my homework correctly, the title of this talk is going to be something along the lines of uh, how how to deal with your older players, or things to consider when you have older players um, part of your gaming group, whether it's online or not. So I was speaking about I uh, how I kind of approach this year, and that I wanted to put on more videos, but I didn't. But I am playing live games because I'm not really keen on online stuff, and I'm shy, and this is why I'm reluctant, artsy. So I was invited a while ago, and things kind of changed. I moved my groups around, changed the Thursday group to Wednesday, and freed up Thursday. And I was approached by an individual about going online and playing an online game that will go up on YouTube and Twitch. And so I said yes, and I've created a character, and it's now there. And I guess this week and next week, and for the foreseeable future, every 2 weeks. I don't know exactly what the schedule is. I'll be playing online, and you'll get to see me as a player, and not as just a talking head. Uh, I'm nervous. I think that you go into new experiences nervous. I think that it's easier when you're younger to go into new experiences. In actuality, at least in my situation, it was easier to be an extrovert younger than it is now. And I don't know if that resonates with everybody, but then I have other things that I've kind of let go. Like, my ego isn't as important as it was back then as it is now. I don't really care if I make a fool of myself now, whereas, 20-year-old me would have been appalled. So that's big news. And it was one of the goals, one of the uh, Discord servers that I'm on, and that I support financially. I had said that, one of my resolutions this year is to do online gaming. And I didn't know how that was going to come about, but it's now a reality. I'm fortunate to live in the Atlantic zone, time zone, because it puts me only 4 hours difference from England, 5 hours from Europe. And that makes a big difference when gamers in the UK or Europe are playing in the evening, because for me, it's kind of the afternoon. And so it makes it much more palatable for me to play between, say, 3 and 7 my time than it would be if I were playing, say, 7 to midnight. Uh, and that's one of those things that if you're playing with an older player, we have limitations that many of us don't want to accept. Some of us are very much different from others, so I don't want this generalization to cover everything, but this might resonate with some of your players. If you want to play with your parents, even your grandparents, um, that I think, or older players who are part of, say, a group at your friendly local game store, you've got to take into consideration some things that I don't think we used to take for granted when we were like in the 80s, but I think that we do now. At the moment, we've moved from, not to dismiss racism, it's out there, believe me. Um, but ageism in the in the gaming world is a major problem. Uh, and one of the issues is that you'll see an older player and you'll automatically assume that all they want to do is go back and play the nostalgia that they grew up with. And you may not be wrong. Nostalgia plays a very important part as you get older. And it's not a nostalgia for the sake of nostalgia. It's kind of trying to recover lost time, like Proust, à la recherche de temps perdu. You go back, you want to recover that lost time because you are in your 50s, 60s, or 70s even, and you're playing a role-playing game, and you remember what it was like when you were 15, and we still think very much like being 15 wasn't that long ago. And for a younger player, it's hard for me to explain to my all adult children that you think you're like this now and you're going to be like this forever. Well, you're not. By the time you're 30, you'll be a very different person than when you were 20. And when you're 40, you're going to be even more different, and 50. So, seize the day. Take the opportunities that you have immediately and don't wait to grow up. Oh, I will do this when. If you have the economic ability to purchase a whole bunch of games, play the games. Don't just be a collector and have a library of books, very much like I have. Uh, enjoy your time and enjoy the energy that you have, because as you get older, you do not have the energy that you used to. Now, I may look young for my age. I'm very soon approaching 60. I've got a few years, a couple of years. And I, though my mind is quick, I do forget names. If you've watched me over years, that is something that's relatively new for me. The other thing is driving at night. Now, a lot of people play at night because that is when they have time off. And that's great. But playing online, as much as I've spoken against it, the benefit is that older people can play because they're able to drive. They're able to go around. They're able, or they're not. They're not able to because maybe they can't see. Maybe they're not able to navigate the roads like they used to. And you may say that this is ridiculous, but it's true. I found that in the work that I do, which is primarily for much older people, but we do have a fair number of people who are within my age range, that going out at night is not preferable. And it isn't because A, we've used up all of our energy during the daytime, and we do have a limited amount of energy, and so we're exhausted by the evening. So it really requires a pushing of oneself um, to engage in a regular group. Now, this may resonate with some, and it may not, but it should be something that's considered when you're playing with older people. I'm not talking about your 40-year-olds; they're still pretty, pretty good. in my experience. But when you start hitting 55, 54, 55, I think I started noticing the change with myself. I was driving, I would say I was 53, 54, when I was driving an hour and a half to play with my wife there, play for the same amount of time that it took me to get there, maybe a little bit more. So play for 2 hours, drive for an hour and a half, then drive for an hour and a half home. And I hit a couple of animals. I hit a skunk, and then 6 months later, I hit a raccoon. And I messed up my car both times. And so I needed to have body work done each of those times. And also, because I hit them square, my radiator needed to be replaced. So it was major work. Now I was fortunate not to have. I had a good driving record, so my insurance didn't go up. But it was kind of a wake-up call that, you know, I was not as aware in both of those cases as I should have been. And I know that animals just kind of roam out if you're in the rural communities like myself, but I've noticed that I do have more difficulty driving on secondary roads, especially when the yellow markings aren't in the middle of the road and when somebody leaves their headlights on and is approaching. Um, these are subtle things, and you may think, well, what do they have to do with role playing? Well, the older player may not want to play at night, but very keen on playing because of driving. And so having an online game may be a better option to play with older people. I'm not saying that it's across the board, but I'm saying it's something to consider. Uh, as you get older, digesting rules, for some people, it's a natural task. They are very intuitive in the way that they're able to read, but vision issues do become uh, an issue, and it does have to do with driving, but also with reading rules. Now, I'm dyslexic, and I have a level of ADHD, and so my personal concentration throughout my life has been very difficult when it comes to absorbing rule sets. And I must say that I've become much better lately, but it still takes me time. When I got these new glasses, the ophthalmologist said, well, you have some, uh, you have the beginning of a cataract. And that's consistent with my family history. And so this eye isn't as strong as this eye. So this eye, I always can get bang on when it comes to, your tests, the letter tests. But this eye, uh, the individual couldn't get it to the best and wondered why and looked back at the imaging and did the microscope on my eye and said, yeah, okay, well, you're just starting to get some clouding, just very, very minor, but it's enough so that your eyes are off. These are things to consider with people in their 50s. They may act as if they're young. They may seem as if they're young. They may have the same energy as when they were young, but there are other factors to consider. Going back to the nostalgia issue, nostalgia is a time issue, as I said. It's a going back to trying to recapture a youth that you realize is getting lost as you get older. You realize, and a healthy person doesn't think about it every day, but you do from time to time remember, oh my gosh, I'm approaching 60. I could die in the next 10 years or in the next 20 years, certainly much more in the next 30 years, and probably absolutely in the next 40 years. So you look at your life differently than a young person who has life in front of you. And though you have uh, the same level of despair and uncomfort and issues of paying bills and life goals and hopes and dreams and how do you accomplish them, and then the letdown of life. I know this is going downhill fast, but in your senior years, I think that in my experience, a lot of people similar to myself want to get back to having the same fun, which they can still have because our minds don't age, uh, unless you have Alzheimer's and dementia and stuff like that, and that's a completely different situation. But we still feel young. And I think the ageism comes when there's an assumption that an older person is only going to want to play OSR games or is against fifth edition or against fourth edition for that matter. Uh, Nostalgia is simply wanting to continue to have the fun that you had when you were older because our minds can still do the things that we generally want to do. Our eyesight fails, our memory begins to fail, and I guess as our bodies start to get the aches and pains of joint issues and arthritis and shingles, things that kind of you're not anticipating as you get older, but they become much more prevalent. A, a younger person may not take into consideration that the reason why an older person may not want to play isn't because they're not keen, but because there are issues around nighttime play. The other factor, and this is absolutely, this has been a revelation to me. I'm not as yet affected by this, but I see a number of people who are in their 50s and 60s, and certainly later on, who need to have a washroom. And you may think to yourself, well, what the hell does that have to do with with gaming? Um, just like a red card gets lifted up for a situation that is uncomfortable, um, don't discriminate against your older players when they say, I've got to leave the table for a second. It may not be anything that you said. It may not, and it may have come at a time when you thought that you may have offended them. But they get up and they have to go, and they have to go. And so this is a reality: is that our functions need to be attended to in much more of a timely manner than when they were younger, than when we were younger. Uh, and physically, again, sitting in a chair for 3 hours or 4 hours playing a game for that amount of time without a break. I think this is where Matt Mercer is absolutely brilliant. Is he always, even from day one, they always had a break. At first, I think they had a 10-minute break, but it was sufficient for everybody, and all around the table were, I would say, in their 30s, pretty much, that they needed that stretch. And having a break after an hour and a half of play is a good, it's just good practice. It is good for everybody, even if you're just stretching. But sitting in a chair for that amount of time, immediately you may not notice that it's an issue. You know, you may say, "Are you okay? Is everything okay? Everybody want to play?" Yeah. And everybody says yes. And the older person feels that kind of twinge of, I think my back is getting restless, but I'm okay. I'm okay. And then next thing you know, the person wakes up the next day and says, I can't move. And they realize I was sitting in a chair for all that time. So just minor considerations to take into account. Um, I'm fairly large. I'm not as large as some, but I've certainly gained 100 pounds since I was 17. And when I was 17, I was a regional sprinter, and a very good regional sprinter. Um, and so, as somebody who won many, many medals and was very athletic when it came to track and field, I remember what it was like to be able to move my body in certain ways, and I have the mental muscular memory. And sometimes I think I can still do those things. No, I know. I'm just not in that level of shape. And so, whether it's sitting, whether it's doing a number of different things that require um, physicality, they're things to think about. And I know we're playing a role playing game, whether it's role playing or whether it's role playing, it has implications for the older player. And you shouldn't not have the older player at your table. I think that just like many people online strive to have a variety of different people represented, uh, if you prefer that way of presenting your groups so that you have different people represented, add somebody who's older. Because at the moment, all I see a bunch of people who are relatively of the same age, who think all relatively the same, and all almost, and I hate to say this because it's going to sound bad, but all have kind of an agenda behind the game. And as people watch the games of the gaming community, I think that it's important to have a variety of people, different nationalities. If you're going to play online, have people from all over the world. Enjoy the variety of people out there. And I don't think that anybody should be limited in who they have on. I think that we as a community of gamers should be happy that there are people who love the hobby as a hobby and not as an industry. Um, I think that over the past 3 months, we've realized what the industry is doing to our hobby. And many are unhappy with the overabundance of industry schemes and methodologies that are being employed. And that's not just the older people. I think that we need to be able to reflect in our games, whether they're online around the table or just personally online, that we try to include people who are not simply our friends. I think that absolutely, you should play with your friends. Absolutely. Um, but that if you're doing a broadcast, if you're thinking about doing something different from what other people are doing, try to get a real varied group and try to play a game with people who are very different from your own views, and play the game instead of playing the political game and the corporate game and the agendaism game that is encircling everything that's online and everything that is merchandise. Uh, these are just some of my thoughts. I'm going to be very happy to play. Most of the people are contemporaries um, of myself, maybe a little bit younger. Um, but it's important for us to just remember that we're playing a game, But there are other factors that we need to consider. So if we're considering the limitations through lines and veils, X cards, and we're thinking particularly about violence, sexuality, um, animals, racial issues, slavery, uh, uh, S&M for whoever the hell puts that into a game. We need to have the same level of attentiveness. And you know, my opinions in the past have been we shouldn't need X cards and we shouldn't need lines and veils. Talk to your players beforehand, get a sense of what they're comfortable with, and then play the game and don't bubble wrap people. If they're not comfortable, they'll not be comfortable and they'll tell you afterwards or they'll tell you there. Um, Live streaming, you better make sure that everybody's on board before you go live, because the last thing you need is some drama live on your broadcast. But I think the same type of attentiveness needs to be given to the older gamer, whether it's live and you're playing at your home. Remember that there are certain limitations that the older people have, and there's certain expectations that the older player may have, especially if they played when they were younger. They're trying to recapture a feeling that you are having right now if you were a younger player. And when you get to be their age, you will want to go back to 5e, and you will want to go back to your roots of the game, and they will be your nostalgic memory. It's like music. There's a reason why your big stores are playing hits from the 80s and 90s and no longer hits from the 70s, because the generation who are spending and who are out there are generally my generation. Very soon, the 80s will be dropped for the 90s and 2000s, and I think it's actually starting to happen now, because that's the way marketing works. Because they know to hit a particular audience. Well, widen your net. Try to be diverse in much more ways than just simply showing diversity, but being conscientious about the needs of those diverse people, especially the older people. So that's my rant for today. I hope you have a good week or two or month or three. As I said, I'm really looking forward to playing online. I'm playing a woman character, a female character, and oddly enough, out of almost 45 years of playing, um, I've played female characters. I see that someone has pulled into my driveway and is about to do a blow test for my 1788 house. And they say it's as leaky as all get out, and so this will be fun. I'm going to say goodbye and answer the door any second before my dogs bark. Take care. See ya. Bye.